Good afternoon. My name is Allison McKenzie, and I am the chair of the Historic Conservation Board. I would like to take a minute to remind everyone about the rules of this proceeding. This proceeding is at all times governed by the rules of procedure adopted by the board on September 26, 2011, last amended on March 9th, 2020. A copy of the rules of procedure is available for review in the back of the room and online. All those planning to testify today, which does not include those solely making arguments such as attorneys, should please stand now and take an oath administered by the board's attorney.
So again, anyone who intends on providing any testimony in any of the hearings today, if you could please stand, raise your right hand, and throw out loud, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
This is a quasi-judicial hearing. As such, the board reserves the right to deliberate in private. The Ohio Rules of Evidence do not apply to this hearing. However, professional rules of conduct do apply, and candor to the tribunal is required. The board members are citizen volunteers and are not paid for their service. They are treated as public officials under Ohio law. Any attempt to influence them, including but not limited to bribery, intimidation, retaliation, which may include contacting their employer in an attempt to exert influence, is punishable as a crime. All should be aware that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, before you begin your comments, please state your name and address for the record. With that said, let's proceed with the first item. Mr. Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 1 today is an application for a certificate of appropriateness for 1908 to 1910 Freeman Avenue in the Dayton Street Historic District. The applicant is proposing to renovate the existing building as a single-family dwelling and construct a new accessory dwelling unit on the vacant lot to the south. The renovations of the existing building include removal of a portion of the roof for a rear roof deck, the removal of an existing canopy over the side entry door, and some minor window and door alterations on the same facade. So to start with this existing building first, you can see on the plans the location of the roof deck. This is located towards the rear of the building. It will involve the demolition of that rear roof slope and a portion of the side elevation wall in order to construct that roof deck and have visibility over the railing, the new railing that's proposed there. The existing canopy over the entry door on the side elevation is proposed to be removed. The architect has investigated that canopy section and it is deteriorated. And then there are also issues from a building code standpoint with the proximity of that canopy to the new construction and how that is treated. So the applicant has proposed to remove that. That canopy doesn't show up on the original 1891 Sanborn map. It does show up on the 1904 Sanborn that was updated in 1929, although it does look like that was likely in place by 1904, so it is still an early feature. But considering the deteriorated conditions and the limited visibility once the new building is constructed, staff doesn't have serious concerns with the removal of that canopy. On the front elevation, the existing features will be retained, the ornamentation, including the cornice line, the window and door surrounds and hoods, and the black metal fence along the front will be retained and extended to match the existing style where it is missing. One note on the elevation drawings is that staff will include a recommendation of approval that the existing openings be filled with the new windows in their current configuration, which would be fully arched window on the ground floor and segmentally arched windows on the upper floor, so that it will fill that entire opening. As far as the new construction, the applicant does intend to consolidate the two parcels to create both of these buildings on a single parcel, making the new construction an accessory dwelling unit. It does comply with all the zoning regulations for the ADU, so there's no zoning relief that's needed for this, just the certificate of appropriateness. So staff generally does feel that the proposed infill does meet the intent of the conservation guidelines. It is using compatible materials. It is a similar height to the adjacent contributing buildings. And it is built up to the street in a similar configuration as the adjacent buildings. Staff's initial primary concern with the ADU was the location of the vehicular entry on the Freeman Street side, which is the principal elevation where the guidelines generally prohibit vehicular entries on street frontages and want entries either on the side or the rear of the building. So staff did speak with the applicant about exploring the possibility of a rear-loaded garage on this site. However, Pink Alley, which is directly behind the building, is a very narrow alley with only 6 to 7 feet of width between the curbs and buildings built in very close proximity on either side. So it does not appear that Pink Alley would be a viable option for accessing the rear of the building. And also, when staff was reviewing the previous history of the development on this site, it does appear that unusually this lot has never had a building constructed on it, but it was always vacant, showing vacant in the 1891 Sanborn up through 1950s, and then subsequent aerial photos showing no structures on the site. However, it had been paved over at some point in the past with a curb cut directly in front of the lot to allow vehicular access onto that site. So considering the fact that vehicular access was previously already on this site, there was a small one-story structure at the rear at one point in time that likely had vehicular access as well. So staff has less concerns after reviewing other potential options to gain vehicular access and seeing the history of that site being generally used as a vehicular entrance for most of its history. So, so staff is generally fine with the inclusion of a vehicular entry, especially considering the treatment that is proposed for those carriage doors. It will be built flush with the front of the building and will have ornamentation, including cast stone pillars on either side and the arch above to give it some more character than just a typical overhead garage door. As far as other materials on the property, on the new construction go, the applicant is proposing to wrap the brick on the front facade over onto the side elevations for a short distance that will, when viewed from the street, that will be the primary material that will be seen between the two buildings that are in close proximity on either side. So the remainder of that side elevation, as well as the rear elevation, will be a fiber cement lap siding. So let's see. The replacement windows that are proposed for the main building, they are proposing a Pella Reserve Series window on the front elevation. This is a wood window that is clad with aluminum that does meet the historic dimensions of the meeting rails and stiles. So that is an appropriate window that is on our list of approved windows for historic renovations. On the side elevations where the windows are less visible, they're proposing a Pella Lifestyle Series, which, while still an aluminum clad wood window, the dimensions are smaller than they are on a historic building for the rails and stiles. So we generally don't like to see the Pella Lifestyle on primary elevations, but we have approved them in the past on side elevations where they're not highly visible from the street. So staff feels that that is a treatment for the window replacements on the existing building. So with that being said, staff recommends the board take the following actions based on the plan submitted by Envisage Architecture dated 10/18/2024. Approve the application of a certificate of appropriateness for 1908 to 1910 Freeman with the following conditions: that the windows on the primary west elevation shall be arched windows to match the size of the existing openings. 2 infill door and or window locations shall feature infill material inset a minimum of 1/2 inch to denote the location of the original opening. 3, the fiber cement siding shall be a similar or darker color than the brick of the primary facade. And that 4, the building permits must be issued within 2 years of the decision date or the COA shall expire.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. We do have the applicant Wendy Klopsick signed up. Would you like to come forward and add anything?
I don't have anything to add.
Great. Are there any questions from the board for either the applicant or staff?
Are you good with the windows on the front? You're gonna do the, okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's the intent.
I don't have anyone from the public signed up. I just want to make sure no one else wanted to speak on this item. If not, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness as laid out by staff.
Second.
I'll call the roll. Mr. Zalesko?
Aye.
Ms. Smith Dobbins?
Aye.
Mr. Sunderman?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Congratulations, good luck.
Thank you.
On to item number 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So if we could wait one slot out here. Sure.
Yeah, that was, I mean, give us just a second. We, our attorney was double booked, so we're getting a different attorney.
So we see what happens when the going gets tough.
Just goes to another meeting. Okay, I think we're ready.
All right, so this is an appeal of the decision of the urban conservator from a previously issued building permit approval and certificate of appropriateness. So the applicant had initially proposed for a new in-ground swimming pool, patio surrounding it, as well as a black metal fence on the property, and subsequently applied for a certificate of appropriateness for the retaining walls that are proposed in conjunction with that work. So based on the delegation memo that the Historic Conservation Board delegates certain authority to the urban conservator to approve certain minor work on properties, staff did approve this at the staff level based on the allowances for fence and wall construction, as well as landscaping and site alterations. So you can see on the site plan that the in-ground pool is located in the rear yard of the property. This building fronts Madison Road on the south. Wold Avenue is located on the west. It is a corner lot. However, all the work that is proposed is in the rear yard, and most of that is behind the existing detached garage in the back corner of the property. So you can see the location of the retaining wall that will hold the patio that surrounds the pool. There's a second retaining wall of fieldstone further towards the house in that rear yard. The pool equipment is located in the corner here. And then you can see the substantial landscaping that is proposed around all of this work. So in staff's opinion, this work did meet the East Walnut Hills Conservation Guidelines. It is located in the rear yard. It is not highly visible from the street, and the materials are compatible. So staff did approve this, and that was subsequently appealed by a neighboring property owner. So I would note in the appellant's application, there are a couple of inconsistencies or inaccuracies in that submission in relation to the historic conservation guidelines, where it speaks to the retaining wall height and appearance on page 4. I would note that the guidelines that are listed in the staff report are the accurate guidelines for the East Walnut Hills Historic Districts. The guidelines do speak to retaining walls and their inappropriateness when they're located in the front yards of properties, because it breaks up the open feel of the neighborhood where there are very few obstructions, and most properties do have large front yards. However, in the rear yard, there are no prohibitions on such walls. In the front yard, they're limited to 36 inches. In the rear yard, the guidelines are silent on the height. And there is no specific requirements in the guidelines as to materials or appearance of the wall. However, I would say in general, being in a historic district, staff does generally look at the appearance of the wall and either would want a true stone retaining wall or a block wall that has the appearance of stone through some type of rustication or rough faced finish on that block. So the wall that's in the rear yard does have that appearance of stone, so staff finds that it is appropriate. Another major concern on the appellant's application was the drainage, where he does discuss the drainage being integrated into existing infrastructure as being one of the historic conservation guidelines. However, that is not found anywhere in the East Walnut Hills Historic District Conservation Guidelines. I'm not aware of that in any of the other historic guidelines either, as drainage is generally not something that is a zoning or historic concern, but that is addressed through the building permit process by building plan exam, stormwater management, and the Metropolitan Sewer District. That is not something that zoning and historic have purview over. And then finally, on the pool equipment that's located in the corner of the property behind the detached garage, there are guidelines for utility systems in the East Walnut Hills District, which essentially say that they should be placed inconspicuously and should be screened with fencing or landscaping. And staff finds that this has largely been achieved through their proposed plan. You can see on the photos that I took of the property last week. This is the view from directly in front or directly to the side of the property on Wold Avenue. The pool equipment is behind the bushes here, so there is no visibility currently. Once the winter sets in and the leaves fully drop, there may be some very minor views, but it is not expected to be anything substantial. This is a little further down the street. You can see that is still largely screened from view. So staff did not have any concerns with the plans as they were presented by the original building permit applicant, and did approve this at the staff level. So staff would recommend that the Historic Conservation Board take the following actions. Hold a staff level certificate of appropriateness for the installation of the in-ground swimming pool, patio, fencing, and retaining walls at 1884 Madison Road.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. You, I believe, have the applicant, Mr. Keiser? Keiser? Okay, thank you. Are you an attorney? Were you sworn in?
I am not an attorney. I swore in with the other
Okay.
attorney when he,
Great. I just didn't see your name on my list, so I just wanted to make sure. You have the opportunity to address us first. So if you would like to proceed with any additional information or anything you'd like to tell us about your appeal that you.
yes, I have provided 2 write-ups, of which Mr. Owen, one did not comment on the second, but you guys, you folks have that. As way of background, we purchased a home in East Walnut Hills. This is actually on our property, looking at it from the side, back in 2003. So we've been in the neighborhood for 21 years. We are technically the 3rd family that has owned this property that was built in 1907. Before we remodeled it in 2003, it was remodeled in 1943. So when we got it, it was at a very bad state of disrepair. On top of our purchase price, we've invested more than $1 million into that piece of property. So I only comment on that just to let you know that we are very much embedded into this community and very much appreciate the historic significance of it. So why are we here today? You could add us to the witness list to support the shots and putting in the pool. We commend that. We think that that's wonderful. It's an investment in the community, and we are in full support of that. Through the last 21 years, there are 6 properties that are adjacent to ours. 4 of them, over the last 21 years, have had some sort of major remodeling work that has gone through the historic process. We've never had an issue with any of those. And so we're here today really to talk about attention to detail. And first and foremost, I mean, I'm sure some of you are some college basketball fans here. You might have heard of John Wooden. Well, one of his life's maxims are great things are accomplished through the attention of details. Why is this relevant? Well, I'm sure every one of you volunteers here on the board in the historic district are impressed with East Walnut Hills detail. Whether that was from when you were a kid and you walked down one of the streets and looking at these magnificent homes, or if you were invited to somebody's residence and you went into it and you were just spellbound by its detail. We're here really today to talk about 2 things: the exposed utilities of the pool equipment and the drainage. Now, if you look at the block that surrounds this piece of property from Madison, Anwood, Dexter, and Wold, there are 6 pools, 5 of which have all their utilities encased or enclosed. There's only 1 that does not. And that is, and I provided that in my write-up, it's on Wold, but they're adjacent, it's in the back by the bird sanctuary. So it is like not visible, not audible, not anything. So we're talking about, this is an anomaly compared to the historic norms that have been precedent in this community, okay? Even though that, and I have to commend the shots, they've done a nice job with a lot of their details, right? They're covering up with the landscapes. But as of this morning, if you went to, one second, 2923 Wold Avenue and you're on their front porch, you can see pipes. I don't know if Mr. Owen went on their front porch and looked. Can you see pipes? Yes, you can see pipes. Wold, 2945 Wold, you can see that from their front porch as well. 2940 Wold, you can see that from their side porch. Even on Anwood, 2923 from their back deck patio, you can see the pipes at these different angles. This only needs to be encased or enclosed in the garage. This attention to detail by having it be on the back, I just think is not in line with historic norm. Now, there was never a drain there. Now there is a drain on the back and it's causing erosion. They've used mulch. As soon as it rains, the mulch is washed away, and I provided pictures of the erosion that you folks can see. So Folks, I appreciate what you do, your commitment here, attention to details are important. We support the pool, we complement that with the investment, and appreciate your folks' considerations about increasing the equipment or moving it into the garage and adjusting the drainage. Thank you.
Mr. Burke, would you like to provide your case?
I would, but I'd first like to cross-examine Mr. Keiser.
You may.
Mr. Keiser, you talked about attention to detail repeatedly during your presentation. What detail did you pay to including twice in your various letters inaccurate statements about what's contained in the historic guidelines for this district?
Are you an attorney?
I am, sir.
Yeah, I am not an attorney. I'm just a common
That's
citizen.
not the question I asked.
I understand, but I'm answering. Can I answer? Somebody mentioned to me that it was supposed to be measured from the base, and I was unable to get onto the property to be able to do that, so.
Look, I'm asking you specifically about the points that the Urban Conservator has already indicated, that you misrepresented, and you actually quoted from what you purported to claim was in the East Walnut Hills historic guidelines, and it's not there.
Yeah, and in my subsequent report that I came across, I did not comment on that. So, and,
But you didn't correct it either, did you?
well, I didn't think it was needed, but I was unaware of it. And I was also rushed because the applicant did not notify us out of neighborly courtesy that this was taking place. So, and I was also concerned about the timeline about being able to file an appeal and not have it be pushed and bowled over people. So thank you.
How is it that you can claim that it's important to pay attention to detail and then create a quote, and you have it in quotes, that purports to be from the historic guidelines?
Doesn't dismiss the other points, sir.
But this was to be taken as being true and accurate?
Best of my knowledge at the time, yes.
Where did you get the quote from that you claim comes from the historic guidelines? It's on page 5 of your
I
original.
don't have that in front of me, sir. It still does not mitigate the other points. I'm sorry if that upsets you.
It ought to upset anybody who takes your word for something.
I'm not an attorney. I'm not a zoning attorney. I'm just a citizen that has invested a lot of money into the community. I've been here for 21 years and appreciate the care and not to have pool equipment, but just needlessly exposed. So
You've indicated that you spent over $1 million in renovating your property, is that right?
yes,
And since your appeal was filed, you posted your property for sale, didn't you?
how does that make any relevance to this?
You're the one who made the issue of the amount of money you put into the property.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
You did post the property for sale, didn't
Absolutely, I did, but it's not relevant to this.
you?
And I even mentioned it to the applicant too. at the
You have
time.
a sale pending now, don't you?
Yeah, it's not relevant to this case
You
because I could have easily not come in here if I didn't care.
you have a sale pending, don't you?
I don't have to comment on that.
I'm sorry, but you are under cross. You are the one who put the issue into relevance. You have a sale pending, don't you?
I've not put that into relevance. You did. I've lived in the neighborhood for 21 years.
I think I'm entitled to an answer to the question because ultimately it will go to standing, especially if there is an attempt to appeal this.
Please answer the question, yes or no.
It is pending.
And it's pending for $1,950,000.
I don't think that that is relevant to this case, and I'm not going to answer that.
Please answer the question for the record.
Yes.
Would you agree that your home, your house, is approximately 100 feet away from the boundary line with the Schott property?
I have never measured it.
Would you disagree with that statement?
I cannot comment on it.
Today, and in your second written submission to the board, you're all in favor of the construction and the installation of the swimming pool, right?
I'm in favor of the Schatz investing into the property and improving the neighborhood.
Your original letter dated October 22nd starts out as saying, "We respectfully submit this appeal in opposition to the certificate of appropriateness for the proposed swimming pool." That's what you said, isn't it?
Based upon Cassandra's advice on how to actually get it appealed, that's exactly what I alluded to. As I said, I'm not an attorney, I'm just a concerned citizen that lived in the neighborhood for 21 years and invested a lot into the properties.
You also claim in that original letter of October 22nd that the retaining wall is more than 48 inches in height, didn't you?
I was not able to measure it because I did not approach on the property. And
Your
so
testimony is you never entered the property?
I'm saying that to measure that wall, I did not put a measuring tape on it. I had to use my phone to be able to use the approximate measure device on my phone. So according to how the phone measures things, that's what it came across as.
And that's what you stated in here was it's 48 inches in height. As you sit here today, do you believe it's 48 inches in height?
I think we've talked about this twice, that doesn't take away from the other matters of where the utilities are being placed.
We haven't talked about that at all. My question today to you now is, do you believe the wall is 48 inches in height?
I've not measured it, so I don't know.
But you said.
I have not put it, I'm
you
sorry,
said in
sir.
your letter.
I'm sorry, sir. I have not encroached on the property where my property has been encroached upon and taken a tape measure and measuring from the base to the height. So I cannot say what the height of it actually is. What I did in my report, given the time frame that I had, used my phone to estimate how it is because they have the measurement device on the phone.
You did not indicate in your letter that that was only an estimate, did you?
I didn't know that I had to.
In fact, on page 3 of your letter, you state with regard to the retaining wall height and permitting, quote, "The proposed retaining wall intended to support the pool is 48 inches tall." That's what you said, wasn't it?
I don't know how this is relevant to where the pool utilities are. That's the thing that I am contesting.
The question,
I understand what your question is.
and here, in your original application letter, you are contesting the height of the wall.
Now, there are 4 things there that are contesting. Yes.
And with regard to the noise that you claim may impact you, you've said noise is likely to be heard, didn't you? You didn't say it was going to be heard.
Well, since the pool's not operational, who could tell? But from other pools, yes. It's just common logic.
And your letter also claims that, never mind. In your second letter, the November 11th email, you do seem to acknowledge that the equipment now remains partially visible from public areas, including the sidewalk. Partially visible. That's your word now.
Yeah, and that you've heard me also quote today complimenting the Schatz for their landscaping and some of the details, but it's not totally gone. And as I mentioned also on testimony, if you go to 2923 Wold, or their front porch, look, you can see pipes. 2945 Wold Avenue, you can see that from their front porch. 2940 from their side porch, you can see it. From Anwood in their backyard on their front porch, you can see it. These are all the neighbors that surround this back end of the property, which is from a streetscape frontal view, even though it's the back of his property.
Has any of those other neighbors expressed to this body or here today to express to this body any opposition to this?
Verbally to me, but who would really want to be cross-examined in a neighborly sort of manner in this capacity? Nobody really wants to do that. I feel obligated for the neighborhood to be able to do that.
And you're familiar with the fact that there are at least 5 letters from neighbors supporting shots.
I'm not aware of 5. I think there were 3 from what was filed last week, a week before. And once again, I'm in support of the shots having the pool.
Did you read the staff report? It says there are 5 letters?
There were only 3 attachments, I'm sorry.
And you saw my brief, and the one argument that I made is that you sat by and watched the work go on here without making any effort to stop the work, which you could have done if you thought the work was being done illegally. You could have gone to court and gotten an injunction to prevent the work from continuing. You didn't do that, did you?
I was not aware of the work until the trees were being removed between the 2 properties.
Trees or honeysuckle?
Well, they look like trees. They look like trees. And the board is here to make the determination on whether that this is appropriate or not. As soon as that's happened, we went and we had a conversation with the neighbor, tried to have a follow-up conversation with the neighbor, which he did not reply, which then forced me to file a COA. As I mentioned earlier, sir, please let me finish. As I mentioned earlier, sir, there are 6 properties that abut our property, and over the last 21 years, 4 of them have gone through this process. We've never had anything like this because there's a thing of neighborly courtesy to sit and talk and say, what are the issues? None of that transpired here.
Are you counting the effort you and your wife made to discuss this matter with your neighbors when your wife entered into the neighbor's home knowing that neither the husband or wife were there and berated their nanny?
Had no idea who was there or not, and then she knocked and she was let in. She had no idea. And I approached later on that evening on the front door and knocked and asked for a meeting, of which I was delayed before you showed up.
Mr. Keiser, you saw the case law that I cited that I believe establishes that if you sit back and allow a project you don't want to be built, it's too late.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that. It's not irrelevant to the historic district, and also that this was a staff-approved COA. We were never notified, and the neighbor never notified us. So from our perspective, this was hidden until the trees were removed, and then it got exposed. And immediately that afternoon, we went across and started to have a dialogue with it.
You indicate in your November 11th email that the guidelines take precedent and remain enforceable regardless of construction progress. Is that right? You said that.
Yeah.
So it's your position that the guidelines take precedent over the Ohio Supreme Court?
Apparently from Cassandra, in speaking to her about this, when the appeal was filed, construction should have stopped. And that all construction that went on after the appeal is actually liabilities on Chuck. I asked her that specifically, and then hold on. And the construction actually accelerated.
Mr. Keiser, are you aware of any order issued by the city of Cincinnati to the shots that they had to stop construction?
It's not relevant to what I do or their case. What the city does is what the city does.
And you indicate in responding to the case law that I provided to you that unlike general zoning disputes, this case involves property within Cincinnati's historic district. That was one of your arguments, right?
Is this property in the historic district?
This property is.
Yeah, okay.
But so is the property that the Sixth Circuit, the United States Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals dealt with in OTR Adopt versus the city of Cincinnati that mooted the efforts to continue to appeal that case because the property was well under construction.
We were not notified of this. As soon as we finally were notified and attempted to have a conversation about it, we were rebuffed. And so I had no course of act less than file an appeal. And it was done in a timely manner. And we're still talking about the placement of utilities that are from the streetscape in a historic district are visible and will likely be audible. And that's just not appropriate for the historic norms. And the attention to detail in these beautiful homes of these volunteers that have to sit and listen to this today in regards to trying to do what's right for the community. We would like to have them have the pool. It's just attention to details of the encasement of the utilities. It's that simple.
But the details only, never mind. You're appealing the decision of the Urban Conservator, is that correct?
I'm appealing the certificate of appropriation.
Issued by the Urban Conservator.
Yes.
And did you look at the Cincinnati zoning code, section 1435.055? And I'll provide you with a copy of that and a copy of that to the members of the board as well. You have a chance to take a look at that?
I did, but I'm not an attorney, sir. You're a real estate attorney. So this is like, inappropriate from the questions, but yeah, go on.
The last sentence of that section of the code states, notwithstanding anything to the contrary contained in this chapter 1435 or chapter 1449, all appeals of certificates of appropriateness shall be appealed to the ZBA pursuant to section 1449.01B. And that applies to whether the certificate of appropriateness was issued by the Urban Conservator.
To find out what's the process, I was advised by Cassandra, I wish she was here. This is what I needed to do in order to stop the construction. Oh, I'm sorry, Cassandra.
And where in the guidelines for the Walnut Hills Historic District is there anything about drainage?
Look around at the properties and you don't see
My
things.
question is, where is it in the guidelines?
Well,
In writing, didn't you?
the drainage changed from what it was to where it is today. And they had a drain that was on my property until they pulled it off my property, so. This is still, it's still skirting the issue about the utility placement. Let's not waste these people's time. This is about where the utilities being placed.
We're trying to, you're under oath,
I understand that.
and we are trying to determine what's accurate and what you have presented to the board and what is not. Do you agree?
Do you
what
agree
told
that the
board-
placement, do you agree
Do
that the
you
placement?
agree that what you told the board in writing is inaccurate
In regards to what?
in regards to issues around the
Sir?
No, you're not.
I had to use a phone from about 10 feet off the property to be
I'm
able
done.
to.
I have no other
No.
questions.
Oh, thank you.
I'm prepared to move forward with the presentation of the property owner. And it may help, because we're going to refer to some of the exhibits. And I know you've got this on the system, but I also have hard copies. Thank you. Of this. And I apologize for the length of time that this is taking, and I'll be as brief as I can. I do have the obligation of creating the record that will either justify the decision that you make should it be appealed, or enable the Schatz to appeal your decision successfully, we hope, to the zoning board of appeals, should that be necessary. I'll go forward with my questions for Mr. Schott. Mr. Schott, would you please state your name and address?
Michael Schott, 1884, Schott, 84 Madison Road.
And you and your wife live at that address?
We do.
And can you briefly explain why your wife is not with us today?
She's at a doctor's appointment. We're expecting our second child as our 10-week ultrasound, so she's at a ultrasound there, but
And you have one other child?
yeah, he's 4 years old.
And briefly, how are you installing the pool?
Really to make memories with our family. Hopefully we intend, God willing, to be here a long time and neighbors. Yeah, we truly view ourselves as stewards of this home and trying to do our best to improve it, not just for us, but for future generations.
And you reviewed the brief that I filed with the board before it was filed.
Yes, sir.
You and your wife both did?
Yes,
In fact, you and your wife wrote part of that brief, didn't you?
yes, sir.
And to your knowledge and belief, as you sit here under oath today, are the facts contained in that brief and the exhibits that are attached to it true and accurate?
Yes, sir.
And you also read the staff report
Yes, sir.
by the Urban Conservator. And you heard the Urban Conservator today, and I'd note, and I will come back in just a minute, was what the Urban Conservator said in his staff report and in what he told the board today, true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, sir.
And I would note for the record, as I have previously here, I object to the fact that the Urban Conservator was not sworn in. His testimony was not under oath, and I was not permitted the opportunity to cross-examine him. I understand that is the city's position. It's my position, that's wrong, and I will continue to object to that. And by the way, I have another matter pending in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals where they just decided they will be able to cross-examine. This wasn't from the Historic Conservation Board, but from a hearing before the city's zoning hearing examiner. And we will be able to cross-examine staff before the Zoning Board of Appeals. That should be the way it is all the time. I wouldn't have to incorporate into his testimony what the Urban Conservator said to get that put under oath. So it does become part of the record and the testimony in the record. Mike, when you began to plan for the pool and the backyard work, were you aware that you were in the East Walnut Hills Historic District?
Yes.
Can you describe what, if anything, you did to comply with the guidelines?
You know, my wife's in real estate development as well, and we really respect the whole process. And we hired the best 2 contractors we referred to, one of which is here today, Beautiful Landscape and Design, who submitted the permits, or at least plans that we used for the permits, and it's Cincinnati Pool Professionals. And then filed everything with the permit office and trusted that the process was working after that.
And if you can go to page 9 of the packet that I put in front of you, and that's Exhibit 1. Can you describe what that document is?
I believe to be essentially a documentation of the history of the submittals and approvals for our plans. That's my knowledge. That's my knowledge.
And if you go to page 11, does that document from the city of Cincinnati indicate that the plans were reviewed by Historic Conservation?
It does, yes.
And if you look simply at the last of the 3 references there, about midway down the page, can you read that into the record, what staff of COA said about the application?
in-ground swimming pool and patio surrounded in rear yard, not highly visible from surrounding streets. 4-foot black aluminum picket fence meets East Walnut Hills conservation guidelines.
Why was there a second review by historic?
We made some modifications, specifically because our lot is sloped and we wanted to level out the backyard with sort of with the pool essentially. So for our young kids, it wouldn't be, please, for our kids, it wouldn't be sliding down and into the pool, to be quite frank. So that required a modification to the plan. So then we resubmitted to the plan. So we did the permit office, and they did have some questions about some items that were on the plans that we then added some more clarification to. So there was a second, I believe, certificate of appropriate issued after we requested those modifications.
And you subsequently did receive a written certificate of appropriateness this time around.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, sir.
And when was the building permit issued by the city?
The exact date. June 9, 27/24. Apologize, I'm a little new to where the exact date was. It looks like 9/27/24. Unless I'm misreading that.
How about
24.
October 8th, 2024?
So that's when it was formally, it's his review, but yeah, that may be when it was issued.
And your project, did you start doing work on the installation of the pool we're having it done prior to the issuance of a building permit?
No.
And since the issuance of the building permit was issued and the work begun, has the work been inspected by the city of Cincinnati?
Yes, several times.
And did you have the opportunity to talk with the city's building inspector?
Yes, I did, for about 30 minutes on one of his site visits, and he gave us assurance that he's been completely comfortable with how we've handled the process and supported our project, and he was doing some measurements of the retaining wall at that time, which was fully installed, and said we're doing everything correctly and to proceed.
How tall is the retaining wall?
He measured it, I think, like 33 inches, 36 inches from what I remember, but it's certainly no higher than that.
And did the city inspector have anything to say about the need for you to stop construction?
No, sir.
Did he say anything about continuing with construction?
Yeah, he said he's been in full support and you have permits and absolutely continue.
Can you take a look at pages 17 through 20? Is that the application for what was the second review?
Yeah,
For a
yes.
certificate of appropriateness?
And to make it-
Page 17.
And to make some clarifications to the plans that staff requested, just to have.
And is page 18 the certificate of appropriateness that was in fact issued?
Yes.
And are the statements contained in that certificate of appropriateness? And can you briefly take a look at pages 21 through the 3? And those are exhibits 3, 4, and 5. Describe what those are.
Those are photos of the north side of our property. Relatively full foliage, at least of honeysuckle. And then the recently planted substantial completion of the landscape on the rear of the property to try and protect both the pool equipment and the wall itself from neighbors' line of sight, which is obviously young landscaping and takes some time to grow. Our intent is to plant things more permanent, and obviously with the benefits of seasons that they'll be grown and there'll be substantial coverage.
And you indicated that that was the substantial completion of the landscaping. Is the landscaping completely in?
We intend to actually add some more for the fence installation, which is required from the city permit, and see where there are any gaps and holes. You know, we intend to build a project that's, again, appropriate for the neighborhood. period. So if there is room for more, we have stuff on site to be planted.
Explain that, have stuff on site.
Yeah, we have several remaining arborvitaes on site and other additional landscaping prepared to be installed if needed. As long, it's within the direction of the plan submitted. But we want to provide as much coverage as possible.
And can you estimate what percentage of the total work has already been completed?
Josh could probably answer that better, who's here from Beautiful. I would say my everything.
70%.
About 70%. So 70 to 80%.
And
70%.
talked a little bit about your neighbor's investment in his property. What's the cost of what you are doing in your rear yard?
With some change orders, probably about $230,000. Of which we spent about $170,000 today.
I have no other questions. I have no.
Mr. Burke, do you have additional witnesses?
I have no other witnesses. We do have, as was indicated, Josh Udapole, who's the general contractor on this project, is here if there are any questions that might be more appropriate for him.
Mr. Keiser, do you have any rebuttal?
Yeah, I have a couple questions.
Excuse me, he can't ask questions.
Why can't I ask a question?
Understand. Yes, you're allowed rebuttal, but not to ask questions of the attorney.
Is it normal for the city to notify the applicant once an appeal's been filed?
I don't know the response to that, and
Sir, this is your opportunity to provide a rebuttal argument to Mr. Burke's argument. You don't ask the board questions. You don't ask.
Okay, it's interesting to find out on whether or not construction slowed or stopped, or whether or not the folks were notified that there was an issue that needed to be resolved. It's unclear to me as this unfolded, as I said, that I'm not an attorney in this matter. I'm just an invested person in the community for the last 21 years. And I've invested a lot in the community, 4 times more than this pool that they're putting in. It's an issue about visibility. There's visibility of pool equipment of the 6 pools that surround these properties. 5 of them have the pool equipment encased and enclosed, and that is a historical precedent. There's only one, and that's abutting the bird sanctuary where the pool equipment is exposed. Landscaping with 1 or 2 trees, 3 trees, attention to detail, they've done a nice job. I want them to have the pool. Landscaping with the pool. This is about how this is not visible from the other neighbors' points of view, or people visiting, walking down the street, saying that's what this is really about. So thank you. I appreciate everyone's time.
you have we do have a few members of the public signed up. Looks like Mr. Billy.
Sure.
My name's Damian Billy. I live at 1886 Madison Road, which is the property immediately to the east of Mike and Laura's property. And we can't see any of the equipment in the back, and we're fully supportive of the project.
Mr. Burke, would you like to cross?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Billy. I also have Margaret. I apologize, I'm gonna butcher
It's
this.
okay, we're the both neighbors, he speaks well.
Okay, okay, thank you. That is all that I have signed up for public comment. Was there anyone else who came in later that was wishing to speak on this matter? Mr. Burke, do you have a closing that you would like to?
I do, and I will keep it brief, although there are a couple of issues that I think should be noted. We do appreciate the support of neighbors, seeing 5 letters from neighbors that are in your packet. I was impressed to see that the individual who has perhaps done more development in historic neighborhoods than anybody else that I know of is one of the people who has written the letters, and that's Steve Lieber, who happens to be a neighbor and is 3 CDC's head. And all of the development he's done in historic neighborhoods, including and specifically OTR, should be recognized. And he certainly understands what complies with general historic guidelines and what do not. I do want to point out that I do believe we are correct in stating that because Mr. Keyser failed to take any steps to attempt to stop the project from going forward, and as the investment continued going on, I think the matter is mooted and the appeal could be disposed of that way. I also think this appeal could be disposed of because it doesn't comply with the ordinances as they are published by the city of Cincinnati. And I had this conversation briefly with Dave Sturkey, and I will tell you that we don't agree. But the ordinance, and I've handed it to you, says that appeals from the issuance of certificates of appropriateness don't come to you if they were issued by the Urban Conservatory. They go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. That's what the code says. If you think it should be otherwise, then it should be. And I think that's an issue that should be taken up with Cincinnati City Council. But let me say this as well, on the merits. The applicant has, as staff has pointed out and agrees, demonstrated by credible evidence that this project, as is, and as is proposed to be finished, substantially conforms to the applicable conservation guidelines. And we're talking about the applicable conservation guidelines, not, frankly, conservation guidelines that were in Keyser. And that's what he did in writing, not once, but at least twice, in pointing out different things that he claims were in conservation guidelines that are not there. He claims were not there. And yet he wanted you to believe those, because that's what he did. The wall is not 45 inches tall. The wall conforms to the descriptions in the applicable conservation guidelines, not in the conservation guidelines that Mr. Keyser frankly created that do not exist. And as staff has properly pointed out, drainage is not an issue that is in front of you. That's not part of the conservation. Drainage is not in the guidelines at all, despite Mr. Keyser's attempt to make themselves claim that they're in the conservation guidelines. They're not. And I don't think you have the ability to put them in there because he says they should be there. They're simply not there. I do believe that what's before you, proposed by the Schatz, conforms to the real conservation guidelines. The appeal should be denied and the Schatz should be free to continue to complete the construction of their project as proposed and as recommended for approval by the Urban Conservatory. Thank you.
Here you have the ability to make a statement in closing if you would like.
Thank you. Folks, appreciate your time. I know that you love the community and you love the neighborhood. Otherwise, you would not be sitting here today. So thank you for that. You know, The case that I'm making is in terms of kind of what are historic norms in this area. You can say it's guidelines or not guidelines, but when you look at the historic norms, I'm making some historic norms. Out of the 6 pools that surround this, 5 of them have the pool equipment encased or enclosed. We're just trying to stick to that and have these utilities not visible from different homes. And I quoted in here those properties where this pool equipment is visible. So I'm just asking folks to address that. So thank you so much for your time.
Okay, questions, comments from the board? Okay, questions from the board. Ms. Lasko?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It looks like the now the term is, Madam Chair, the term escapes me, the vegetation, what is the honeysuckle, thank you. Thank you. Everybody in Ohio should know what that is. That looks, according to the plan, it looks like that's entirely on the appellant's property. Is that accurate?
It's on there.
The appellee's property.
I believe it's on there.
Is it honeysuckle is on your property?
Yeah, we had it surveyed by Fox and Fox, I believe is the pronunciation. So we had staked everything before removing anything from the property.
I'm looking at page 5 in the staff report. So I visited the site. Without getting on the property, it was difficult to tell, are those arborvitaes smaller ones around the equipment?
So we planted large arborvitaes, about the largest arborvitaes that Josh could find, quite frankly, along the backside. Then we, to be respectful of the property line, changed the landscaping to, you don't remember the name of it?
Like they're burning bushes out front and
Are you saying around the pool equipment?
No, around the pool equipment.
Gosh, that's a bad question.
If you want to see a picture of those on my second page of my second thing, you can.
I looked at that, it was hard for me to tell. I guess are those actually evergreens in front of the pump equipment or is that?
Yeah, those are evergreens. Yeah, we decided to go with a bush that was, especially with the installation.
So the root, so the root ball of the evergreens with the slope of the current hill could not be planted with the arborvitaes. So we planted a type of viburnum that gets bigger quicker. That has a smaller root ball that can, without creating a huge slope that was then draining into the neighbor's property. And we had to do that just because of the slope.
According to
That's shootable. And he has been sworn in.
Yeah.
Thank you. So according to this exhibit drawing, it looks like there's about 12 feet there between the garage and the property line. Is that accurate?
So we wanted to, we've had a lot of problems with the neighboring property. So to negate those problems, we didn't want to remove any more honeysuckle, which is the foliage.
You said that's on his property.
No, it is not on his property.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not on his property, but
Correct.
that is a decent bit of blocking. And I mean, if we were to remove this at this time, it would create more issues with him, the neighboring property, which was already a headache in itself.
So I just have one more question. Question for Mr. Owen. Were you aware that were you of the understanding that was honeysuckle or the new planting that was concealing?
Based on the plan, I assume there would be new landscaping shown where it is around that full equipment.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Owen,
Yes.
Madam Chair. Mr. Owen, what is the policy as to notifying surrounding properties ahead of the pre-meetings or a action taken by, in this case, you?
For a staff-approved certificate of appropriateness, there is no notification that I'm aware of for a area that's where staff issued COA.
If it came before the board, would there be need for a notification?
Yes.
Do you see a problem here? I'm just asking, I mean, and I understand we've delegated responsibilities to you, but I take responsibility. If you're going to make decisions that impact neighbors, I think the staff has the same obligation for their decisions as it would if it were coming to the board. And in this case, it seems to me that whatever the issues are, this would have come up in a more timely manner had that notice gone out. Just observation. And I do appreciate the difficulty on this particular site because this is the Schatz backyard. It's also 25 feet off of the front yard of the Keezers. So, whereas I appreciate, and I truly do, and I don't want to grossly limit staff's capacity to move things through quickly. But in this case, we do have equipment that is, you know, we can talk about what we're going to plant in front of, but absent some screening, we have mechanical equipment that is 25 feet off of Wold, correct? Did you look at that? Did you understand that's where the equipment was going to go?
Yes. And based on the existing landscaping that's on site combined with the landscape plan that was provided, I felt that that was substantially screened.
My, Madam Chair, is that relying on landscaping as a permanent block for something like that is not adequate because landscaping comes and goes. Had it come in a timely manner in front of the board, I would have said, hey, if there's no other place to put that, can we get some sort of screening out? As it is, and in full candor, I live a block away. I drive this and I've been watching it. It's like, okay. And really, it was like, okay. Until all of a sudden the pipes started coming out and the equipment got set. And I'm like, really? Really? Again, I understand it's the backyard for the Schatz, but it's the front yard for the Keezers and for all of us who live on Wold. And so that's my takeaway on this is, had it gone, that's my take. Had the Keezers understood what was happening in advance rather than reacting to something that was already done, and or had something been accounted for as far as screening, I wouldn't have a problem with what's going on here. I do have some question. You've changed the elevation, and now you're concentrating drainage. I'm not an engineer on that, but if we're really concentrating water and we're draining out through groundscape, that can be a problem. But for me, that's my issue is the screening or relocation of that equipment.
And if I may, I would just note from the guidelines, it does say that mechanical equipment on the ground should be screened with a fence or plant materials or housed in a structure that is in harmony with the surroundings.
I was going to comment on that, Mr. Voss. I think there's in my mind, I'm formulating two issues here. One is, I agree with you. I don't think the guidelines are sufficient. But number one is, I think Mr. Owens' judgments are in compliance with the guidelines that exist. So that doesn't necessarily help these two gentlemen out. My sense is that they are it according to the guidelines. I'm standing over there and I can see with your turnaround how all this kind of works visually. Seems like they should have been, my preference would have been, they would have been screened with some kind of hardscape. I don't know that he has to pay for it though, based on where we are in the process. That's what I'm not sure of in my own mind yet.
So I do think this is a unique
I
situation.
have one more, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. maybe the bigger issue is, should we even be reviewing this? Because one of, maybe the bigger one of the issues that was brought up was the ZBA should be looking at this, not the historic conservation issues, according to that. So,
My understanding in speaking with Mr. Sturkey is that our purview as our historic board at this point in time is to assess whether we would have granted this project a certificate of appropriateness given the design as presented. I know that there are other questions that have been preserved for the record that are for other bodies to decide. But my understanding is that the applicable thing for us to be talking about is whether or not this design meets the requirements for a certificate of appropriateness.
thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to say that we've done a fair amount of work in the East Walnut Hills area. And it seems as though every time we have to make a decision, there's a lot of people here, there's a lot of comment, there's a lot of angst. I applaud the neighbors of the area for how seriously they take the historic nature. I think that if it had come before us, I agree that Mr. Shalako, that we may well, I'm voting, I'm going to vote in favor of this. I'm going to vote, but I think we might have been a little more forceful on the screening around the equipment. So I kind of wish it had come in front of us.
We can do that now though, right?
Again,
We can have stipulation.
our purview to determine if this is worthy of a certificate of appropriateness for this area, given the historic conservation
Point of
guidelines.
clarification, is that approval conditions, standard COA or?
We are evaluating whether we would have issued a standard COA if it came before the board.
I would like to see a much more permanent structure. I'm in agreement with you. Plants come and go, but a more permanent structure to cover that. That's what I would have asked for had this come before the board.
And also, I'm a little dismayed that the neighbors were not formally made aware of what was going on. And maybe we would have had a little better feeling from the neighbors. I appreciate neighbors coming in and testifying, but it bothers me a little bit. I always think about myself, what if I lived on the street?
Go ahead.
Like make a motion to go in executive session.
There's a second. I'll call the roll. Mr. Zalesko. Call the roll. Mr. Evans.
Aye.
there a motion to return to session?
Make a motion to return to regular session?
Second.
Mr. Zlesko?
Aye.
Mr. Dobbins?
Aye.
Mr. Sunderman?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Now entertain a motion regarding the application.
Madam Chair, I move to affirm the decision of the urban conservator with the condition that the applicant construct a fence to be approved by staff on the north and west sides of the pool equipment. It is the maximum height and opacity permitted by code.
Second.
Mr. Zlesko?
Aye.
Ms. Smith Dobbins?
Aye.
Mr. Sunderman?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. So that's clear. Okay, the only other piece of business we have is that it's Mr. Voss's last meeting with us, I understand.
Oh.
So, a little appreciation clap.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
Isn't that nice?
It is,
Pretty cool.
9 years, that's what you get. Just keep working, guys.
Okay,
That's very thoughtful. Thank you, Cassandra. I know you had everything to do with it and everybody else just tagging along. Thank you.
I think that's it unless there is other business that I'm unaware of. Okay, is there a motion regarding adjournment?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.